Welcome to the February 2025 Early and K through 12 Education Policy Committee meeting. Today we'll be talking to Superintendent Cade Brumley with the Louisiana Department of Education. Superintendent Brumley has been in this role since 2020, and he served as Superintendent of Schools in Jefferson and I believe DeSoto Parish prior to becoming the state's top education officer. So we're just so honored to have you with us today and ready to learn all about what's going on in K through 12.
Well, thanks, Julie. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, we're very happy to have you. So, I know that there's been a lot of hubbub lately, and in the last few months, about the LEAP scores, and then boom, we did so well on the NAEP. And so I was kind of hoping that maybe you could talk just a little bit about those gains that we made on that national test. And then, kind of maybe contrast that a little bit with the LEAP so that we can kind of understand where we really are. Because, as a citizen, and I'm sure as a parent, it's probably pretty confusing.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. It's a good question. There's no doubt that both on our state assessments, which we call LEAP, as well as the nation's report card, that Louisiana academic outcomes are moving in the right direction quite significantly. And I'll always begin that by just sharing my appreciation for the teachers across the state of Louisiana for the amazing job that they're doing. Just to put that in perspective, the entire country faced a global pandemic, obviously, in the educational setting, but the entire country did not face multiple named hurricanes, ice storms, some of the other significant factors that we face in the state of Louisiana, and the teachers have just done an outstanding job of staying focused on ABC and 1, 2, 3, and getting greater outcomes for kids. And likewise, I always share both written and verbally that the early education system in the state of Louisiana, for really birth to four, the owners, the leaders, the teachers were really the gem of the pandemic because we pushed in a ton of resource there from the federal government with COVID dollars, but had those early care and education centers not opened up, I just am unsure how the Louisiana economy would have been able to open up. And so they did a really good job of that from the economic standpoint, and that doesn't even mention the academic and social development needs of Louisiana's youngest learners. So I really think that everyone has done a really good job in the state of Louisiana in the education space over the last 5 years. Naturally, that doesn't mean that everyone always agrees on everything. But I was having this conversation with someone earlier this morning, and I said, even when, I don't agree with a particular group or a particular individual, like I really think kind of collectively in the state of Louisiana, when people say we're here for the kids, I think that's true. And I do think that that's what everyone is working to do, is to make sure that kids get better outcomes, and so we're seeing that. If I look specifically at LEAP scores, which are our state assessments, we have seen year-over-year growth in those assessments, looking at proficiency rates of students, and we're basically at or above the pre-pandemic levels of achievement, give or take. When we look at the nation's report card, which is the NAEP assessment, which is what kids from across the country, uniform assessment in all the states, when we look at that, Louisiana is the only state in the country, according to a recent Harvard-Stanford study, the only state in the country where students have exceeded their pre-pandemic numbers and recovered in both reading and math. And then when you look at the nation's report card and the national rankings, you see Louisiana in 2019, we were ranked 49th in the country. In 2022, I think we were ranked 43. And then most recently, we're ranked 32nd. We've led the country on 2 consecutive cycles of NAEP on literacy growth. This time we were top five for math growth. We um, we also outpaced the national average for students with exceptionalities and students from lower income homes. Um, and then and then another study that came out from the Urban Institute pointed to the fact that if you adjust NAEP for demographics and you essentially look at apples to apples across every state, I think Louisiana was number two in the country for overall performance. And so a lot of good stuff is happening, but what I continue to also just share is that, and I think everyone associated with your group, Julie, would appreciate and understand too, is, still, we have too many kids not reading at grade level, too many students not proficient in math, too many students entering kindergarten not K ready. And then obviously too many students in F-rated schools. And so we're trying to make moves on all of those fronts. And I know it can be frustrating systems and frustrating to individuals, but we're just trying to make moves. And I know that that's tough and that's hard, and there are a lot of relationships to always try to do your best to manage. And I'm not saying that we always do the best. But I am very proud of our state and the work that we have all done together to move outcomes for kids.
Well, I mean, that's such encouraging news. I know that, that makes me feel so much better. But one thing I wonder is if when I saw the LEAP scores from my high school that I had gone to many moons ago, it was a completely different world. But I was just devastated because it's like, oh my gosh, is the leap the right measure for us to be using? I guess is what comes to my mind.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, LEAP is just the Louisiana Educational Assessment Program. So you 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 have various tests that could be utilized and called LEAP because LEAP is just the frame for the testing structure. We know that LEAP is the LEAP assessment that we use right now is very rigorous. I think that people from across the country will tell you that our standardized test in the state of Louisiana is one of the most rigorous in the country. And I think probably the individuals that you have associated with your group here, many of them already know and appreciate that. And we haven't shied away from the fact that that is true. Even if you look at states that are neighboring states, I think that our test is much more rigorous than their assessments. And so that is true. But also what is true is that over the next few years, the state of Louisiana will be looking at the future of assessment and making some decisions on what does the assessment need to look like moving forward. I personally think that students are testing too much in the state, but I also believe we can't just wave a wand and say, well, we're no longer taking 80% of the test. I don't think that's smart because the information that we get from the assessments helps us drive policy and instructional decisions. So, we are taking this with a bit of a surgical approach. We reduced the amount of test questions on this year's LEAP by something from 20 to 30%. We were able to do that with psychometricians that ensure validity and reliability of the assessment. We were able to pull questions from the test and still get valid and reliable results. And so this year's LEAP test will be shorter by about 20 to 30% than last year. We're also looking at some other assessments that we might can pull moving forward. And then within the next month, I'll probably be making an announcement there around additional testing reductions because we are, I mean, frankly, we just believe that students are testing too much, but we have this parallel belief that we have to assess or we're not going to have information on how to make good decisions. And so we're trying to balance both of those things. And I think we'll continue to make progress on that over the next 2 years.
Yeah, because it just feels like I think for the state, the LEAP test has just gotten to be where it's just demoralizing, I think, and it's hard. It's hard to see that kind of lack of success. And then when you see this NAEP result, it gives you a little bit of hope. Do we give that NAEP exam to 100% of students?
So one thing back on LEAP that I think is important is to also note that Louisiana, I mean, probably a decade ago, took the position that proficiency in Louisiana means mastery. So students have to be at that mastery level of content to be considered proficient in core content in Louisiana policy. So, for instance, if a student scores a basic on LEAP, we don't consider them as proficient because there are still academic gaps, and that's a policy decision that was made about a decade ago. So keep in mind when we say X% of students in Louisiana are proficient, that means X% are at mastery plus on their success rate. It does not include students at that basic level. In terms of NAEP, no, NAEP uses a sample population of every state in the country, and they assess in every state. And so in the state of Louisiana, there were about 150 schools that were pulled for the sample in the state of Louisiana, and students in those particular schools were assessed.
Ah, okay. So,
And
um,
Julie, we don't control the selection of those schools. Like that's all done federally by the National Center for Education Statistics. So they do the sampling on that. They provide for the assessment. We don't, as the Department of Education, administer that particular assessment.
yeah, would a state be allowed to give something like the NAEP to 100% of students to see how we compare, or is that not a possibility?
Well, I mean, I think if you're looking at tests that are similar across the entire country, you could look at ACT in the high school, you could look at SAT in the high school, but we are the only state that gives our particular assessment, which is LEAP.
Yeah. Well, and did we stop? It seemed like I remember a bill or something coming down about not requiring the ACT anymore. Did that? Yeah.
Yeah, so last legislative session, well, actually, there was a bill that was first considered that would have done away with the end of course assessments that students take in English 1, English 2, biology, civics, and algebra and geometry, and it would have simply replaced them with ACT, period. So you would no longer have had the end of course assessments. You would have only had ACT. That did not make it through the process, but what did make it through the process is that students do not necessarily, if they're in high school, have to take the ACT anymore. There are a listing of tests that students can take, and previously every student, whether they were on the university track or the career college, I mean the career development track, vocational skills track, every student had to take the ACT. And this last year in legislation that shifted, that students have that choice of with their parent whether they want to take the ACT or not. Now, most of your university bound students are going to take the ACT anyway because they need it for college admissions or they need it for TOPS. But certainly we think that we'll see less students who are on the vocational trades skills track take the ACT because it's no longer a mandate for them.
So, kind of making a little bit of a shift from that to standards. I know that there was a good amount of questioning going on over the last few months about what sort of standards would be implemented for the schools to follow. And I just wanted to get kind of an update on where we are on that process.
Yeah. Well, primarily we're looking at standards in the core content areas, which would be English, math, science, and social studies. We did social studies 2 years ago. We call it our Freedom Framework. We think that they're the best in the country. They speak to the American spirit. Grades K through 3 are called the American story. So they're looking at people, places, papers most significant to the country. 4 and 5 is world history. So it's like a survey of world history in fourth and fifth grade. We take sixth through eighth grade and we take 1776 through 2008 with the historic election of Barack Obama, and we divide that into thirds. And students begin that that with 1776 in the sixth grade, and they travel through 2008 as an eighth grader. And then high school, you have civics and American history, and it kind of culminates with students in American history being asked to evaluate the construct of American exceptionalism. So that's like how that progresses. Um, we are beginning the process, and we have taken applications for individuals that have interest to rework our math and our English reading standards, and so that will be happening over the course of the spring and the summer. For me, I mean, I think there are a few things that are really important there. One, making sure that the standards, particularly in the elementary grades, reflect all of the work we've done around the science of reading, and making sure there's really good alignment there. The other piece is, I think, middle and high schools, making sure that we're integrating enough grammar, because if we want students to be successful in ACT, LEAP, university, I think we need to pay a little more attention to grammar. And then the other piece there is an incorporation of some of the quote great books in Western civilization, and making sure that students are having the opportunity to read complete novels, as opposed to just excerpts. So working on those, thinking about those things for reading, and then on math, really just making sure that the standards reflect a need to build math fluency in the early grades, and also incorporate some level of logic in those standards, logic and reasoning that previously may not have been there to the extent that we would like to see. And so groups of Louisiana teachers will be working over the spring and summer to develop a revised set of standards for math and English reading. And those would go into effect not for the next school year, but essentially 2 years out, which will give us time to do training and raise awareness. There's not talk right now around addressing the science standards that are already in play. We just developed a set of computer science standards for the state, K-12, which is the first time we've ever had computer science standards, K-12, of what students are supposed to know and be able to do dealing with computers. And then we're going to be kicking off in the spring or summer or fall, still up in the air a little bit, physical education standards, and trying to make sure that those particular standards are helping us combat some of the issues that we see, whether it's juvenile diabetes or mental health issues, some of the other issues that are related to health with elementary students and middle and high school students. And so want to make sure that those health and PE standards also reflect some of that work.
Well, and that made me think about early childhood. That's always been something that we've really prioritized in Ellevate. And, you alluded earlier to when kids have a good start, and they get a good early education, learning opportunities as little kids, that they're more successful in elementary school and throughout their educational journey. Where do we stand on early childhood from your perspective, and what can we do to get more emphasis on it?
Yeah, well, Julie, I mean, from your background, that there really hasn't been the level of consensus that people on this call and in your audience might necessarily want around early childhood education. I know that this particular group really does a good job on focusing on that particular body of work, and they are many of the heroes of the work from the last few years. I think that this upcoming legislative session will be really interesting on this particular space, and talking to various people. There's like a real concern about trying to maintain the present levels of funding for early care and education. What I try to share with individuals is that, yes, there are the academic benefits. There are the supervision benefits, so parents can go to work, but there's also the economic benefits of early care and education as well. And in fact, the governor, I saw Governor Landry just put out a video about this a few days ago. So we're trying to stay consistent with him and his office on the early care and education piece. And also when I think about kindergarten readiness, we and you have people that are doing great work, but I would like to see maybe some additional emphasis and attention on developmentally appropriate language development in early care and education. And maybe that looks like our agency creating open source resources for centers to use for language development, because I know those resources are expensive. But I would like to see kind of at scale a bit more emphasis on language acquisition and development in those earlier years. And that isn't to say that some centers aren't doing amazing work with that. I just think at scale, we have some opportunity there.
Okay, well, interesting. So, one of the things when people listen to a talk like this, you have parents that think, I would just want to get more involved in this, or I want to learn more at the top level, at the Department of Education level. What would you suggest for a parent or an interested just citizen that wants to learn more or get involved? What could they do within your context?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the magic happens when you have parents working with the teachers and the teachers armed with a robust curriculum. I mean, I think that's where the magic happens in terms of learning materializing for the kid. We've been very deliberate about trying to not be a go-between the systems and the families. Like as a former principal, like I just believe fundamentally that the parent in the local school, or even maybe to some extent the parent in the local system, is where that engagement has to be. I don't think it really should be the parent and the State Department of Education. But we do have our social media accounts. We run an a Twitter site. We have our Facebook, and we just try to provide information. But I would just continue to encourage parents to just stay in contact with your child's teacher, your child's principal, your child's school or school system around the things that are most important to you. And also try as a parent to understand, where the school or the teacher is coming from as well. Because, communication is two-way there. And likewise on the early care and education space, maintaining those conversations between parents and the owners and leaders of centers. And so the more local that communication and collaboration can be, I think the better off we're going to be.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Well, Superintendent Brumley, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. And for all of you listening, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. If you're interested in these types of policy talks, check us out on Ellevate Louisiana's website, where you can learn more about our events, our policy committees, and our advocacy efforts, and also how to join. That website is ellevatela.org, which is ELLEVATELA.org. We hope to see you again on this video podcast, as we're excited about kicking it off again this year, and hope to see you next time. Have a great day.